Awesome. Hey there, Vinnie. It's great to see you again. And hi to your audience. I'm super grateful and excited for the opportunity to share a little bit more about Transmute since we last spoke at the SAP I/O Supply Chain Foundry Demo Day in New York about a month ago. Just really quickly before I dive into the presentation, I want to give a shout out to the SAP I/O team who's been instrumental in accelerating our product integration with the S/4HANA products at SAP. This is a really important piece of our commercialization roadmap, and it's obviously what a lot of our customers have chosen to use. And so we're really grateful for the access and support in terms of engineering and other resources that the SAP I/O team has provided. So really quickly, I'm Kayrl Fowler. It's nice to meet everyone. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Transmute. We're a technology company headquartered in Austin, Texas, and we have a verifiable data platform that is helping modernize a lot of the import-export processes in the United States and beyond. And so I'm excited to today share the same kind of backdrop that I shared at the SAP I/O Demo Day, give you an overview of who we are, the problem we're solving, the markets we're focused on, but then a little bit more detail on the kind of architecture and technologies involved and what it can do for your company. Just to set the stage for the listeners, so Transmute is a B2B software solution, and we today are in market and serving customers that import goods specifically into the United States, including manufacturers, customs brokers, and carriers who operate in supply chains that are listed here. So digital manufacturing products, everything from mill products like steel, aluminum, and other metals, as well as parts in the automotive, aerospace, and device sectors. And some of them are more recent traction and deployments have been in the e-commerce sector. So if you're in one of these categories, this could be interesting for you.
So, and Kayrl, are you primarily, what do you find? The imports are primarily your customer, your transactions, primarily from Mexico, or are they global?
Yes, great question. So to date, and as you'll see later in the presentation, we focused very heavily on initially imports into the United States and commercially have gone to market or have the most traction in the USMCA region, so Mexico and Canada, although we do have some work in the EU as well.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So going back in time a little bit, when we founded Transmute, I was working in the semiconductor and bioelectronics industry. In particular, I was working for a semiconductor manufacturing foundry where we engineered highly regulated parts for both the defense and biotech sectors. And we used a tremendous amount of paper, more paper even than in the usual supply chain. And it got myself and my co-founder thinking a lot about secure and efficient data exchange in trade, and particularly curious about how much manual administration is involved in just a single supply chain shipment across an international border. And it turns out that it was way more than we even thought. Just a single shipment alone on average takes about 50 documents exchanged by up to 30 different partners and is generally costing companies on average up to 3% of their annual revenues just spent on paper alone. So this is obviously incredibly cost intensive and expensive, but with less than 1% of trade documents fully digitized today, and companies still relying on piecemeal solution like PDF formats, EDI data formats, and Excel, it's no wonder that effectively the same data silos that existed in the paper world are still in existence today. So there's still a lot of friction and a lot of susceptibility to fraud, editing of documents, but also just human error as a result. And that's really where Transmute comes in. Our product, the Verifiable Data Platform, ingests a variety of data formats and converts them into something called verifiable credentials. You've certainly heard of verifiable credentials under other names, things like digital twins, or more recently, product passports. So this is a technology that solves for data provenance in a machine-readable way that allows original data to be transmitted across the supply chain in real time. So here's just a sneak peek of our product. Much like many enterprise SaaS applications, we have a web app, but our API is what does all the magic. We already have over 80 different supply chain credential templates, things like commercial invoices, bills of lading, preloaded into our product so that you can use our API with your existing, say, SAP S/4HANA setup or other enterprise solution with ease. Effectively, and what I want you to take away from this is that our API allows for the ingestion of data from a variety of claim sources, whether that's paper, PDF, EDI, or ERP solutions, and we transmute the raw data into actionable data. So that's really the superpower capabilities we'll get into of using verifiable credentials. For any of the IT folks in the room, here's a peek at the modular architecture that our product is relying on. So I mentioned our API does the magic, but here's really the core 3 technologies we're using to make that magic. Verifiable credentials are all signed with something called decentralized identifiers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. And we use semantic web technology to actually unify all of the data elements so that everything's machine readable. And not only are we saving time when it comes to paper administration, but also when it comes to collating or reconciling and aggregating data for actual use within your business. Just briefly, before we get into use cases, here are the core product capabilities of our verifiable data platform. So we have all the kind of basic things you'd expect in terms of company onboarding and subscription management. I mentioned that we have a variety of supply chain templates already loaded. We've to date focused very heavily, like I mentioned, on imports into the United States. And there's, of course, a collection of documents that allow folks to import goods into the United States and comply with regulations, but we're constantly adding. So most recently, we've begun to add templates that support export into Mexico. So in the LATAM region, they have slightly different requirements, as well as EU required credentials. Presentation really refers to the secure exchange of information so that when you're sharing your commercial invoice, say, all of your partners in the supply chain know with certainty that it came from you and it hasn't been tampered with or copied. And finally, interoperability. Our product's built entirely on open standards that governments like US Customs have mandated as part of their trade digitization strategy. So we're an API-first solution that's built on open standards and interoperable with your existing infrastructure. One feature, which is again where our friends at SAPIO come into play, is our adapter marketplace. Our product from a business model perspective is a lot like Stripe, but for verifiable credentials, where you can insert our infrastructure really into any chain of custody. We've even supported things like software supply chain. So as such, we wanted to build an adapter marketplace that lets us showcase the integrations that are most useful to our customers. Integrations you can expect to see here include claim sources, places like ERP systems like the SAP S/4HANA integration that we have today, and future ERP solutions that we have coming soon. But integrations can also be data output sources. So I'll show you here in a second how our Neo4j adapter helps our customers visualize their supply chain in a real-time and automated way that's easy for business users to query. All right, so I've said a lot about our product and the architecture, but for just a second, I want to take us into our work with US Customs. I mentioned that our product is built on 3 core technology standards that we authored in the open source at the W3C and the IETF. Here's a view of those technologies: verifiable credentials, decentralized identifiers, and linked data. So our product, the Verifiable Data Platform, combines them all into a single interface that's very easy to adopt. But these data standards are also the same technologies that our customers like US Customs and many other regulators globally are mandating or adopting as part of their trade modernization initiative. And the reason is clear. US Customs, much like any other actor in the supply chain, needs better data faster in the process in order to meet their charges, largely in order to clear goods across our ports of entry as fast as possible, but also protect our national security. Using our verifiable data platform, they've been able to achieve 100% reduction in data discovery time. So today, on average, for instance, for a steel import, it takes about 32 days to track down all the paperwork involved. But now we can cut that by 100% and have our trade facilitation representatives focused more on the violative goods or anomaly shipments instead of dealing with paper. We've worked, the other thing to mention, over the last 4 years under contract with them to author those open data standards I mentioned that they've mandated as part of their trade facilitation and modernization framework. So in addition to government savings, we're also helping reduce administrative costs for enterprises. And in fact, have found that using verifiable credentials to link supply chain transaction data with the shipment and the customers in a non-intrusive way has become incredibly valuable to our commercial customers. Here's another view of some of our existing customers. I mentioned today we're serving the digital manufacturing space, in particular when it comes to metals products like steel and aluminum, automotive and aerospace parts, and even device supply chains. And I've also talked a little bit about the cost savings when it comes to data reduction and data administration costs. One of the other reasons for the ability to cut costs so severely in data administration is that our verifiable credentials not only are digital and machine readable, but they let digital information function a lot more like a physical credential, say something like a driver's license, where you can present the original information authoritatively across your supply chain in real time. So just like a driver's license, where I can show it to my pharmacists or a police officer within the same hour in different contexts, and they can verify that the Texas DMV authorized that issuance of that document. Now a commercial invoice can always be mapped to the issuer of that information. And if you need to update it, revoke that credential, expire that credential, or replace that information, your whole supply chain can know in real time and with certainty. Last but not least, we're able to focus attention more on pursuing revenue opportunities and mitigating risk, because using machine readable verifiable credentials like our platform provides automatically unifies all the data elements in your supply chain into a 360-degree view that updates in real time and is very easy for business users to query. So with that, I'm actually going to shift gears into a specific customer use case. Before I do that, just revisiting who we serve today in terms of our commercial customer base. We're actively working with and looking to work with other partners who import goods into the United States, manufacture goods that will be imported to the United States, broker those goods, or carry those goods across any of these areas in digital manufacturing. Just briefly, depending on what the value proposition or motivation for buying is, changes really which department tends to engage. Certainly for a lot of the compliance pieces we're talking about here, we expect folks like trade compliance professionals to be involved, legal departments. But when it comes to some of the visibility and administration savings, generally we see some of the quality and procurement teams be more involved. All right, just briefly, I want to show you what the collection of documents required today to import steel into the United States looks like. The top two rows are the kind of basic level of documentation required today. And today in a steel supply chain, the steel producer, manufacturer generally kicks off the data chain, and all of the information is slowly issued until it aggregates at the point of a customs broker who files an entry. In a world using verifiable credentials, you'll notice that we have the same actors involved in the supply chain or network, only instead of aggregating or bottlenecking information at a customs broker, information that's certified by each of the issuers is able to be received in real time by all of the necessary players. So for instance, things like the purchase order, commercial invoice, quality or mill test reports are able to be transmitted to US Customs in real time before a shipment ever moves, which unlocks things like pre-arrival clearance capabilities, enhanced trusted trader programs, and more than that, it reduces, again, data discovery time by 100%. To give you an idea of impact, a lot of the steel companies we work with import their goods across the Mexico-Texas border. And if we could speed that border up just by 10 minutes, it'd be an impact of nearly $400 million annually just in those local economies. So this is a multi-billion-dollar impact. Looking into that exact same steel workflow, I wanted to show a visual of what each of the knowledge graphs or supply chain maps looks like for each different customer persona. We are not like some of the platforms who, for instance, use blockchain or other technologies that require everyone in the supply chain network to get on your solution before anyone gets visibility. We're very different because we're built on open standards and we've used things like decentralized identifiers to enforce privacy by design. Our customers own and control their data, and their supply chain map includes their proprietary data. The supply chain map, say, of US Customs is only going to include what you chose to share with them. They don't get access to the rest of your map. This is an important distinction of our product. Here's a couple other views of these maps and suggestions or examples of what some of our customers like to look for in their map. Generally, they like to look for risk hotspots or opportunity hotspots, so places where a lot of data elements or suppliers in your network intersect. Additionally, being able to aggregate large volume sets and look for trends or anomalies in certain patterns. Origin and country of melt and pour is particularly important in supply chain, and the origin of suppliers contributes to things like tax breaks under certain trade agreements. So this is a really useful tool in those contexts. And this is one additional view. And with that, I will wrap up my conversation, but it's been really fun to kind of explain some of the underlying intricacies of our product, and really happy to be here.
Couple of questions. Complexity, right? Global trade is always changing. So when you have tariffs, like we had in the previous administration, did that add more steps in the process, or was that kind of a normal workflow?
So it's a great question. And you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of what is so challenging and complex about solving for this data silos in global trade and in global supply chains to begin with, which is that not only are there a lot of diverse actors and historically competing interests, things like national security and fast, customs clearance, but it's also a dynamic environment. New regulations are introduced, whether that's new tariffs or things like we're seeing with UFLPA and anti-forced labor regulations or sustainability initiatives. And that's part of why it's been so challenging to find technology or data infrastructure that allows for, that is as dynamic and flexible as the trade environment. So what we've had to account for in building our product and our architecture is really building consistency across variability. This is one reason we chose to build on open standards. So the core technologies are the same and have been matured and tested in such a way where we feel the data rails are ready to go. The next part of variability really comes to the schemas themselves. So understanding, for instance, what are the common basic documents required to import into the United States? What differs by commodity, for instance? And when you're going to market, how do you focus? So for instance, a few different documents in steel are different from a few in timber. Some of the core documentation may be the same, but just as a company in the space, kind of navigating what's common across that variance, it has definitely been a point of challenge. And building on open standards and using semantic web technology that didn't reinvent the wheel, but actually mapped to other authorities in the industry, be it U.S. Customs, folks like GS1, who of course issues, the G10s and the barcodes on products. They have certain formats, et cetera. And so that's one of the biggest efforts we invested in early on.
And given that you do business, quite a bit of business is Mexico sourced, what do you find maquiladora, but it's coming from a subsidiary of a company. Does that cause a very different workflow, or is it just treated like any other imported item?
Yeah, so kind of two different ways I want to answer that question. One is that there's a feature I didn't talk too much about, but in our product called traceable workflows. This is something we've tested with U.S. Customs. It's built again on those same open standards, but the way that we've surfaced in our product is kind of exclusive to us. But effectively, what it allows for is it uses the semantic web data and verifiable credentials to stitch together a picture of a shipment. And now that could look like a checklist that has 9 documents, 4 of 5 of which have been completed. But as the chain continues, which doesn't have to be a chain, it could be issued in any order, just like supply chains are always dynamic, you slowly build a higher resolution image of that shipment so that you can, once you have a sufficiently complete image, you can make a clearance or enforcement decision or delivery decision. And so from a feature perspective, that's one way we've accounted for that variety. The other way, coming to kind of the maquiladora question, is quite simply, we've had to build the same way I showed those fragmented data solutions at the front end, we've had to build those capabilities into our product. So we have things like Excel upload and download, PDF upload and download, QR codes that you can use for offline verification of the information in a setting where that's required. And so definitely we've had to there's been a lot of thought behind meeting customers where they're at. we did not, we weren't, there's no silver bullet for that problem. I think anyone's solving in supply chain data infrastructure has to address just the variety of solutions out there.
You've obviously collected a lot of data already. Where do you find the most negligent part of the supply chain? Is it usually the supplier? Is it the procurement people? Where are the biggest roadblocks, if you will, in the workforce, or is it difficult to pinpoint?
That's a really interesting question. And I think as we have more and more usage over time, the linked data, those supply chain map capabilities will help us answer that. Albeit our customers own their supply chain map, so we'll want to be measuring that in partnership. But I think one thing that has been maybe surprising to me is that, well, let me put it this way. So we've chosen, in terms of our commercialization strategy, to focus on other democratic trading partners. Kind of fundamentally, I think a data infrastructure for trading companies or countries who value privacy and competitiveness looks different than other environments. And we've chosen to focus on regions like Canada and Mexico initially. And so the motivations in terms of data sharing, are specific. They want those tax benefits. They, are in good standing and are willing to prove and supply data in new formats for expediency and legitimacy. I think as we mature as a company and have a bigger market footprint, there will be different motivations across different regions. And so I think that's the policy and kind of geopolitical angles of doing anything in trade definitely apply here.
And that's getting more and more complex. Well, thank you very much for the update. Good to see you again.
Amazing. It was great to see you again as well. And thank you so much again for the opportunity. This was fun.
Thank you.